Yukime's story isn't something the anime particularly focused on, but we did get a general idea of what her motivations were. Getten had killed her mother back when she was younger, and it was because of that she climbed her way into power in order to find him again. It's what the anime didn't include to develop this that really diminishes Getten's presence as a character in all this. Like, after getting to know what it was Getten did to earn Yukime's love, it really makes you feel like he too was just a victim of the circumstances. So, as I go through Yukime's entire backstory, hopefully it'll let you appreciate this amazing arc's climax a bit more. I get the entire thing was once again a big misunderstanding, but to Yukime it was definitely something more. I mean, Kanekawa had even made an entire emotional music video framing it that way. As for the fight between Getten and Sid, you'd be surprised to know that that was actually the biggest change in the entire anime, so that's a solo video that I'll be uploading tomorrow. First we'll be talking about this. With Sid having just devastated Alpha and Shadow Garden, the funds were secure and plan ready to be put into action now. Both Mitsugoshi and the MCA had been able to track them to the Lawless City, but with Sid skipping school 24/7 to hinder their movements, that was the closest anyone could ever get to them. It seemed John Smith would always be there to prevent them from getting any closer. That being the case, the counterfeits were sent into circulation no problem, and the gold made from doing so was stowed away safely. All that was left to complete the plan was to turn in the real bills that Yukime had been collecting, then show to the public the MCA didn't have the assets to exchange them all. That would be the trigger that would start the credit crisis. Sid didn't see the need for Yukime to do this herself, but to her this was the most important part of her plan. It was an inquiry that had led to the story of why Yukime needed to take everything away from Getten. So, if we go back to when Yukime was the young age of 14, she was still being raised by her mother in a small village deep within beastfolk territory. Back then, she was still just a one-tailed fox, but her mother, who was the strongest out of everyone, was the village's main hunter with a total of 3 tails. It was often that she would venture out in order to find whatever she could to provide for everyone. It was on one of those days that she was doing just that, though, that their village would be attacked by a separate hostile tribe. This village, in which the only capable person was gone, was now left with no choice but to run and hide as another tribe invaded and attacked them. Yukime didn't stay hidden for long though, as it was only a matter of time before she was found and being dragged out before those who were hunting her. It was right as she thought things were about to be over though that's when a man would jump in and cut down the cruel people holding her. It was a noble member of the reinforcements from their allies of the Great Wolf Clan, a man we currently know as the Blind Swordsman Getten. To us, we may consider him the villain of the story, but to Yukime, who had just been rescued, Getten was nothing more than the person to whom she owed her life to. He was the knight in shining armor who had jumped in to save her. So, with her being 14 and him being 17, it was only natural that he be the first person that she fall for. A person with whom a relationship would have been beneficial to everyone. You see, with the Therianthrope lands being in the state of conflict mentioned in the anime, the idea of marrying these two in order to solidify the position of their alliance was the obvious next step in a time where allies were extremely important. Yukime, as the daughter of the village's only 3-tailed spirit fox, would happily marry the son of the Great Wolves' patriarch Getten. It was a perfect match in which both had equal amounts of affection for each other. The marriage wasn't allowed to happen until Yukime was 15 though, so until then neither were allowed to live with each other. Instead, the two would have to just visit whenever was possible. So, despite living in different villages, Getten would make the journey to come and see Yukime often. It was any time he could that he would always venture over and spend as much time as possible with her. They were the days in which both found they treasured the most. Even more so for Yukime, as she believed these to be her happiest. It didn't matter that the two weren't formally married yet, because the time they shared now was the moments she wished would go on forever. Unfortunately, life wasn't so kind as to let that continue, as a nearby conflict would bring an end to all of it. This conflict taking place between 2 major tribes nearby had come to involve both the Spirit Foxes and the Great Wolves. They were being forced to pick a side, and depending on which they chose, they would either be forcibly conscripted or forced to retaliate. There was no choice in which an enemy wouldn't be made here. No matter what they did, war and fighting was going to be inevitable. So, it was at the very last moment before making a decision that both the wolves and foxes would decide to do nothing. They had picked neither side in hopes of not getting involved with any of them. That may have seemed like a good way to avoid conflict at the time, but this decision to remain neutral would ultimately be the one that would destroy them. You see, by thinking their joint strength and wisdom was enough to have them survive on their own, the cruel nature of war had set out to prove them otherwise. In only a single night after making their decision, both their villages were wiped out instantly. Not a single person could resist the wave of destruction that had come for them. Getten did try to fight back as the strongest, but when all was said and done, the only person he was able to save was Yukime. So, on the morning after, when the destruction was made clear, Getten cursed his weakness and inability to save anything. He was enraged by his own helplessness at the face of those who were stronger. Yukime had tried to comfort him by saying it wasn't his fault, but it was words like that that only went to make him even more angry. They were words that led him to say more than he should have. What I mean is that, in this fit of rage, Getten had started to blame Yukime's mother. If it wasn't for her and her resistance against using the pills, then perhaps their friends and family would still be alive today. If they had just listened and made themselves more powerful, then perhaps their villages may have been able to fend off the attacks and survive all this. It's because they didn't, though, that no one was capable of defending themselves when this invasion happened. It was an attack that Getten knew they could have prepared for, but were instead persuaded not to because of, well, you know. That being the case, it's when the invaders had come and started to attack that Getten would seize this opportunity and go for his vengeance. He had snuck up behind Yukime's mother during the chaos of it all, then chopped her head clean off before she could even notice him. Poor Yukime had thought her mother was just missing in all the mayhem, but what Getten was revealing here was something far more tragic. He had just unveiled the most gut-wrenching betrayal. Getten would then try to justify his actions, but no amount of words were going to change Yukime's opinion of him now. There was no amount of pleading and begging that would get her to accept the power that he was offering. So, as Yukime's rejection signified her betrayal, Getten would be left with no choice but to resort to other methods to get her to listen. He would strike her back and tell her to embrace the power, urging her to accept that revenge isn't something to be afraid of. Yukime would grasp and crawl to try and get away, but with each subsequent motion, Getten would slice her back another time. Again and again, he would rain his sword down, hoping eventually she would understand him. It wasn't until she could move no more that Getten would rest his foot atop her wounds, then urge her one last time to accept this power. Also that she could join him, then go out and seek revenge with him. Yukime still wouldn't be swayed though, so it was right as she would say no one final time that a strange voice would be heard and then nothing, leading her to pass out before getting to see any more of it. It was by the time she would awake that her wounds would be healed and bleeding stopped. Getten was nowhere to be found, and alongside the bodies of her friends and neighbors, there were also the corpses of all their attackers. Eventually, Yukime would find her mother's decapitated body too, and it would be that image which she would ingrain into her memory. That would be the image she would use in order to remember what it was she was fighting for. Everything she'd loved had just been slaughtered or burned to the ground, so the only thing she had left now was vengeance. A vengeance she knew she would need Shadow's help to get. So, as Yukime would declare this as her true intent, she would also ask for forgiveness for having lied to Shadow about it. She had revealed that this entire time she was just using him, and it was for that she felt that she was sorry for. Of course, Sid was just trying to remember why this situation sounded so familiar to him, so it was about halfway through that he just stopped paying attention to her, leading the two to part ways without Sid so much as acknowledging her tragic past. Now, I find it funny that this whole thing has come pretty much full circle, because the whole reason Sid has saved Yukime twice now was pretty much for money, and that was it. I know Yukime and Getten both see it another way, but as the way things truly are, this is how it actually is. If we were to focus solely on Yukime though, if that emotional music video wasn't enough to paint the story in the way that she perceives it, tomorrow's video of the fight certainly will. You'll get to see just how far Yukime's delusion with Shadow goes. It does feel kinda weird calling it that, but at the end of the day, any affection Yukime thinks Shadow has for her really is just delusion. A convenient sequence of events that happened to paint this picture of Shadow fighting for her sake. But yeah, that's the full story behind Yukime. I was gonna combine this with the John Smith vs Getten fight, but after seeing all the changes they made for that, I figured it would just be easier to separate the two. So you can expect that video out sometime tomorrow. Now, if you want to find out all this cut content earlier, you can check out my streams every Sunday where we talk about all the anime I'm watching live. We do games and quizzes, open up some cards, and even give away prizes sometimes. So feel free to follow and come hang out at twitch.tv/AniNews_. But anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!